Oh,
Hello, and welcome to the Dissident Mama podcast, episode number 50. Today, my very special guest is George Michalopulos, who is a layman in the Orthodox Church in America. The Tulsa, Oklahoma native is a pharmacist, father of two sons, Constantine and Michael, and author of American Orthodox Church, A History of Its Beginnings, which he co-wrote with Deacon Ezra Ham. But Michalopulos is probably best known in the orthosphere for his website, Monomakos, One Who Fights Alone, where he and wife Gail have been sharing their hot takes on religion, culture, and politics for the past 11 years. So welcome, George. I want you to introduce my listeners to you. I'm going to introduce them to you. And
okay.
I'm just so happy for you to be here. And you can correct my pronunciations on anything as we go as well.
So far, it's okay. And thank you. And I'm so flattered, very flattered
And
to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you. And we've kind of become friends. There's been a little hoopla going on, but we had kind of established a friendship before that. So we're going to get into all that. And I will give one disclaimer. I currently have the coof. I have COVID. So I'm a little scattered brain normally. So if I just seem completely brain dead, please forgive me. But George is just going to have to take the wheel. And so here we go, George. Give us a little biographical overview. How would you describe yourself, maybe politically? I think maybe dissident right would work. And then tell us, how you would describe yourself as an Orthodox Christian, traditional Orthodox Christian, something else?
Okay, good question. I would say dissident right. I would say conservative, but I'm a huge fan of Steve Bannon, and he's come up with this formulation. He goes nationalist, populist, traditionalist. And I guess that's NPT, because, there's nothing to conserve. If we're talking about gay marriage or abortion, well, you could be conservative if you want to conserve those things. Well, I don't want to conserve those things. As far as religious, I'm an Orthodox Christian. I try to be as devout as I can. I fall and get down or fall down and try to get back up. I'm more of the traditionalist type. I'll be honest with you there. I don't like the way certain of our jurisdictions are going, internationally as well. And I'll just go ahead and say it. I mean, people who read my blog, our blog actually belongs to my wife. Gail is the owner and publisher. So, but know that I'm very anti-modernist, and we can leave it there. We can explore it further if you want.
Okay.
And anyway, part of being a traditionalist, religiously speaking, I think, as well as a nationalist populist, is that I'm rather conservative about the South. And so anyway, there you go. So, I hope that's okay.
Yes, that's great. So I've been a reader of yours for, I guess, 4 or 5 years now.
I'm flattered.
Yeah, I was chrismated into the Orthodox Church this Christmas Eve, the December 24th, will be 4 years. And so I'm new at all this Orthodox stuff, and I've only been blogging for 5 years. So I've, looked to you as well as some other good content creators, of course, the Holy Fathers, of course, of priests. But you are a good person out there who I see as a role model for lay people who like to speak up when they see that strange things are afoot. So I've been a fan of yours for a while.
Well, you know what, and I've only known you for a little while, but I've been a fan of your podcasts. But I'm very flattered. Thank you very much. One thing I don't want to do is lead anybody astray or anything like that. And so the older I get, the more humble I get. I used to have a lot more spit and vinegar in me when I started. Some people think I still do, but at the same time, I realize, as we approach the end of our lives, we've got to be a little bit more circumspect about things and be a little bit more humble. However, that doesn't mean that we have to roll over and play dead either.
Right. That's one thing I really like about Orthodoxy. I find that when there's any kind of I don't know, controversy or problem, personal struggle. It's a balance. The answer is always the balance. You can do
Yes.
both. There's no
Yeah.
mutual exclusivity to orthodoxy,
Right.
and
Right.
I find that solves most problems right there.
Yeah. Yeah. It, as a Greek priest told me a long time ago, it's a paradox.
Mhm.
Okay. You can't always just, in the West, we tend to come down, one way or the other. It's juridical, very legalistic. With Orthodoxy, you embrace the mystery.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
It does. It
Mhm.
does.
Mhm.
Now, people will be able to tell by my butchering of your Greek last name that
That's
you
okay.
are ethnically Greek, yet you are
Yeah.
in the Orthodox Church in America. Are
Mhm.
you cradle Orthodox and then switch somewhere along the ways?
Yes, I am. I was born in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese
Okay.
some 60 years ago. And, but, I was nominal. I think I was devout in my own way, in a normal way that most ethnic Orthodox grow up in. But in the 90s, I started catching a little bit of a bug, an evangelism bug. That's when Orthodoxy was coming into its own in America, I think, and people were converting, pretty well-known people, and then just ordinary people, but by the hundreds, if not. And I caught that wave, and so I was much into evangelism and also into mission work, but missionizing is a difficult thing, and not a lot of the ethnic jurisdictions know how to do it. I don't mean this as a criticism. It's just I mean, it's a critique. And I was told several years ago by a mentor of mine, a spiritual mentor who's now gone to glory. I said to him, Art, this is a big city. We're close to 1 million people. We only have 2 Orthodox churches. We should have 10. And he said to me, if I were you, I'd get in my car, drive down to Dallas and go see Archbishop Dimitri. And that's Archbishop Dimitri Royster of Dallas in the South in the OCA. And so I was somewhat familiar with him. I knew he had served in the Army and was a translator for MacArthur during World War II. And I knew he was a former Southern Baptist. But that's about all I knew. So I did that. I got in my car, went down, visited him, and I was impressed. And then I went again to the consecration of the cathedral. That was in 2001, April 20th on Thomas Sunday, if I remember correctly. And I was just astonished because here was every dream. It still was not, it didn't have any icons. Now it's still covered with frescoes at the time, but the liturgy was all in English, Ruthenian plain chant or Russian plain chant, boisterous, and it was like, and good English, not modern English, Elizabethan English, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is heaven. I felt like those Russian traders felt 1,000 years ago when they went to St. Sophia and said, we didn't know whether we were in heaven or earth.
Mm-hmm.
And here I was, a Greek boy, going to a Russian started church. I mean, the OCA is not Russian, but it started under the Omophor of Russia. And I felt that way. And then little by little, I kept going back, taking friends. And before you know it, we got a blessing. And so I made the switch from the Greek Archdiocese to the OCA.
So, how controversial was that back then? Because there's been a lot of jurisdiction switching since the great divorce of 2020 is what I call all the COVID stuff, because it was just that winnowing of families and friends and churches and all sorts of things, neighborhoods. So what was it like back then?
Not good. It was like, my extended family said, well, why are you doing this?
Right.
I mean, why do you want to go be Russian? I said, I'm not, and there was just, one of the good things about Orthodoxy is that it's very nationalistic in this sense, in that you are part of a collective, and it goes back decades, centuries, generations. Okay. Trouble is, when you bring that here to America, it doesn't fit well. In other words, you got your Bulgarians, you got your Serbians, you got your Greeks. we're Orthodox, but the older generation still can't visualize that,
Right.
and so it was difficult, and it's gotten better over the years. I mean, but it's there is still this intense envy, I think, between the jurisdictions,
Mhm.
and so let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
No, excuse me, it'll get better, and we'll unite when there's a full-blown persecution, in my honest opinion.
Right.
Short of that, nah, it's not going to happen.
Lots of
And
infighting.
truthfully, given the liberal drift of some of the jurisdictions, you kind of don't want to be united right now.
Mhm.
Forgive me for saying that. So hold on, sorry. Anyway,
Yep.
so
Because, so for people who aren't Orthodox, a lot of places have their Orthodox church, but because we're America, we
Mhm.
have multiple jurisdictions, like
Mhm.
George was
Mhm.
saying. And so, on one hand, it's kind of not supposed to be that way,
it's not
right?
right.
But
It's not. It's
but
a
it could be the
scandal.
saving grace.
Well, right now, and especially with the great COVID thing,
Yes.
I think it is a saving grace,
Yes, I
because
agree.
some jurisdictions went the full Fauci,
Yeah.
and some went the anti-Fauci,
Right.
and even some that went the full Fauci, there was some, softening after a while, but this whole, and my wife will talk about this because she is the total expert in this as far as COVID, but COVID and last year and the Floyd riots and the rigged election pretty much showed us, a lot of us, myself included, that boy, oh boy, we're not living in Springfield anymore.
Mhm.
It's it's not un-America completely, but it ain't Warden June Cleaver.
Right. And I think a lot of us who, came into Orthodoxy as converts,
Mhm.
we were just, I knew some of the history. My dad, my husband knew way more of kind of the evolution and the
Mhm.
infighting and,
Mhm.
World Council of Churches and all this stuff.
Mhm.
He kind of knew more of that stuff, where I was just kind of happily going to church and singing in the
Mhm.
choir and doing my thing. I
Mhm.
wasn't completely not
Mhm.
paying attention, as you can look back and see at my writing, but
Mhm.
it was kind of blissful semi-ignorance,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
2020
Mhm.
COVID pulls off the scab. And one of the
Boy, that's a
things
good
that,
way of putting it.
yeah, and one of
Yeah.
the things that, when I would talk to people pre 2020 about, you know, even back then, being, proud of my Southern ancestry or whatever. And, there would be people who'd be like, oh, okay, I guess that's okay. But, whatever, Orthodoxy is the most important thing, which it absolutely is. And what
Mhm.
ultimately matters is
Mhm.
we all come together in the chalice.
Mhm.
Well,
We
we did
do.
not all come
Yeah.
together in the chalice in
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that didn't happen.
Theoretically, we all come together in the
Yes.
chalice, but again, last year was just, it was a nightmare. I
So
mean,
again, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, that's it. I just want it was a nightmare. I mean,
So I was going to say, it's that back to the balance.
mhm.
Yes, orthodoxy first and foremost.
Mhm.
Yes, the chalice first and
Mhm.
foremost, but other things are important too, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That the blending of these things that help, a
Mhm.
person, realize the beauty of orthodoxy in their own
Mhm.
life, or help them express it in their own unique,
Mhm.
diverse way. If I can,
Mhm.
am I allowed to use that word?
Sure. You used it the wrong way, though.
I did. True.
You probably.
The correct way. Well, let's talk about your website a little bit.
Sure.
Pronounce it for us, sir.
Monomakos.
Well, no. Okay. So you and Gail started it. What was
Well,
your
actually, I started it, and
okay?
then Gil came on board and improved it.
Okay.
About 5 years ago, she came on board, and it just maybe 4 years ago, and it just she's been a big help to it. That's for sure. I got to tell you, and she's improved it with the graphics. She's improved it with the research. I mean, she does yeoman-like work research. It's just unbelievable. So, and the name Monomachos comes from it means in Greek one who fights alone, And the origin of that was a Byzantine emperor named Constantine the Ninth, who was called Constantine Monomakos, and I'm not sure why he was called that. And his daughter married one of the Grand Dukes of Kiev, I think Yaroslav the Wise, but I'm not sure about that. And they had a son named Vladimir. And Vladimir took his mother's nickname, Monomakos, and he became Vladimir Monomach. That's how you say it in Russian. And years later, there was a crown made, and it's called the cap of Monomach, or Shapka. I think it's Shapka Monomacha in Russian, and that was the crown that they used to coronate the Grand Dukes of Moscow and later the Tsars of Russia, up until Peter the Great. But the cap of Monomach still has great significance for the Russian people. And anyway, I just like the name Monomach because it begins with an M and my last name begins with an M. So I didn't realize what I was getting into.
So what was your aim when you first started out?
Good question. Good question. I like to write a lot, and I was a regular contributor to Father Hans Jacobs's American Orthodox Institute website. He's in Florida. And I had a friend, a priest friend, who said to me, George, you need to start a blog. You just need to. And he pestered me for about a year. And I said, well, Father, I'll do it if you can help me because I know nothing about technology. And he did. And he says, well, what do you want to make it about? I said, I like politics. He goes, you don't want to do just politics. I said, well, I like religion. He goes, you don't want to do just religion. And I said, well, I like politics, religion, and culture. How about that? He goes, bingo, let's do that. So that's the abbreviated story.
Right.
So I do politics, culture, and religion. And culture is the intersection between politics and religion, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Okay. You can't avoid it. There's no way you can say, well, you have religion over here and then politics over here. It's not possible.
And it's fascinating too, when you give any kind of, dissident right, traditionalist, conservative opinion about something religious, about the church, you have left-wingers always saying, stop making everything political, when it's, I don't think that they can be separated from each other, unfortunately, but also fortunately, because you're supposed to have, a group of people over here who are, let's just say, a nation, they're supposed to share borders, language, culture, and faith. Mostly that's what makes a nation.
That's right.
And so it's just very odd, and I guess it's this whole mistaken Jeffersonian vision with the wall of separation and all that kind of thing, which is nowhere in our founding documents, by the way.
No, it's not. And if I may say something about that.
Yes.
Even if we wanted to be apolitical, and that's one of the faults of conservatives, is that we try to, respect each other's opinions. They're not letting us be apolitical, are they? Right. The ones on the left. I mean, when you tear down a statue, when you block a car, when you throw a brick through somebody's storefront because whatever, how is that respecting? How is that allowing me to be apolitical? Right. It's not. Lenin said, you may not be interested in the revolution, but the revolution is interested in you.
Absolutely.
So anyway.
Yeah, because traditional Jeffersonianism would, it involved live and let live. The empires of liberty is what he called it. So it was, you do your crazy thing over there. Good luck, and we're going to do our very traditional thing over here.
Right, exactly.
But it's tyrannical, it's totalitarian. A lot of people call it authoritarian, but it's totality because
it's totalitarian. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So the culture wars, yes. So it's just like Republicans are like, oh, don't fight the culture wars. And it's like, well, the culture wars are fighting me. So I don't know what you want me to do about that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like the whole gay rights thing, at first 20, 30 years ago, it was like, come on, you're crazy. I mean, come on, seriously? And then they kind of wore us down until, it got to the point where I said, okay, civil union, you can have civil union.
Right.
Okay. And then they kept on wearing us down. And then the Supreme Court ruled by fiat, well, no, there's such a thing as gay marriage, which of course is an oxymoron. It doesn't exist,
Right.
but they won. And we would think, okay, now they're going to stop.
Right.
No,
Oh.
now it's like, no, now it's like, it's important that men who think they are women are allowed to beat up women in the boxing ring, or do enter to women's weightlifting, nonsense. And they're not stopping. And now, 8-year-old boys, they're pumping them full of hormones because they want them to, not go through puberty as a male. I mean, this is abominable. I mean, how did we get here?
Right. Slippery slope, where it's the cliff. So speaking of cliffs, what have been some of the biggest hurdles? Have you been told you're not edifying? I bet you have been. Or too political, or what about your bishops behaving badly stuff? Give us, what are some of the biggest, what's the biggest pushback you've had?
When the biggest pushback that I could remember was several years ago when Metropolitan Jonah was elected primate of the OCA. And I met him. And I liked him. And then I was also familiar with his writings. So I thought, this is a traditionalist, and he signed the Manhattan Declaration right off the bat, which is a prophetic document. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, tell me about that.
Okay, the Manhattan Declaration was written by Robert George, I believe, and a couple of other traditional Catholic Christian evangelicals. And they, gosh, was this 10 years ago? They said, they predicted everything that we are doing right now. And they said, we have to stop it now. This is the undersigned believe X, Y, and Z. And it was all just normal boilerplate, traditional stuff, nothing evil. It's not like we want to go out and kill people or anything like that. And he signed that, and the powers that be, certain powers that be, I should say, he signed his death warrant basically when he signed that. And because the East Coast, the Northeast especially, it's quite liberal. I didn't realize how liberal it was.
No,
believe it or not.
Shocking.
Shocking. I know. Be so much. And they it was a so before you knew it, they were getting rid of him, and it was really hurtful in the way they did it. And I rose to the occasion and became a polemicist, became a partisan of his, and the blog turned that way. And let's see, where was I? So I did receive some pushback for that behind the scenes, especially when it was clear that he was going to be ousted.
Right.
Okay. Since then, I would say I have a few commentators who like to type something. They're extremely liberal, and of course, I'm Hitlerian in their view, because I don't agree with gay rights, transification, feminazism, and all that. And so that's on the blog. I get the comments. For the most part, Gail X's them out, so we never see they never see the light of day. I'd say we're winning, in other words, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I don't know
if I would say we're winning, but I think the Rittenhouse affair, and your article on that was excellent, by the way.
Thank you.
Is a really good example, because the mainstream, and let's just whatever the corporate media decided to, I think were shocked that so many people
Mhm.
saw through what was really happening.
Mhm.
And I mean, I wish this could happen on more subjects, but
I
it
agree.
did happen on him.
Yeah,
And they
it happened
lost
on
that.
him and
Yeah.
and Jesse Smollett too.
Mhm.
I mean, you see, here's the thing that I tell Gail, because, and I have to tell it to repeat it so I believe it, because
Let's hear it.
it's real easy to take the black pill, you
Mhm.
know, and that is that there are more of us than there are of them. There
You
really are.
think?
Yeah. And I'll tell you why. But we think that they're more of them because they control the universities, they control Hollywood, they control popular culture, they control the deep state. Okay, they rigged the president into office. I mean, they rigged a demented man into office. You know, that's pretty powerful. But I noticed about 5 years ago that whenever I would read something on the blog, they'd have a comment section, and usually it'd be something like, "Oh, it's so wonderful that Lori Lightfoot is mayor of Chicago and she's doing all these wonderful things," and then there'd be like 100 comments. "You're full of crap. You don't know what you're talking about. She's evil. She's stupid." You know, and on down the line. Well, about 5 years ago, on the liberal websites, they started getting rid of the comments.
Right.
No more comments.
Right.
And then a couple of weeks ago, Twitter announced that, well, they got rid of Jack Dorsey for reasons I can only speculate. And then they said that they're not going to allow people to. It's not going to be a free speech site anymore. You can't put photographs of mugshots on, for instance, of mugshots of Antifa.
Right.
And then YouTube has said that they're going to take down the dislike button. You know, the dislike.
Right.
Okay, actually it's still there, but you can
Yeah.
punch it. But they're not saying how many there is.
Right.
And so, to me, this shows that they're not confident, and that the majority of the people are not buying into the nonsense.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, now, I mean, I could go into politics and demographics and tell you why I think that the Democrat Party is probably on its last legs. It's because it's a coalition of many different grievance groups, not a majority. Okay, but close to a majority if they can get them all to just sit down and shut up. But you know, if you take a black Muslim, you take a white tranny, a feminist, a Muslim, a real Muslim, a Latinx activist, a secular Jew, and you put them all in the same room, within 5 minutes, there's going to be a fracas. And yet that's what makes up the Democrat Party. And we saw a little bit of this a couple of years ago with Ilhan Omar, in which she said something about Israel policy. She says it's always about the Benjamins. Well, you know, that kind of exploded it right there.
Right.
That there was it's an unstable situation is what I'm trying to say. Doesn't mean that they can't rig another election. It doesn't mean that. Okay, I just don't think it's possible to sustain our country under these conditions.
Now, this would segue very nicely into the fellowship. But before we get there, you know, my thing would be, even if the Democrat Party were to just whatever implode or something, that doesn't mean that the Republicans, you know, have our back, right? You know, because they've had the power.
I agree with you.
Many times, and you know, sold us down the river. So I think they're part of the systemic onslaught as well.
Well, that's called the uniparty or the duopoly.
Yeah.
And you know, some people say, I don't know if you remember the Harlem Globetrotters. Okay, well, you know, the Harlem Globetrotters would travel all over the world, and they play this team called the Washington Generals, and the Washington Generals always lost. But it was like a wrestling match.
Right.
You knew you were going to take a dive, And the Republican Party has been in that hapless
Right.
situation, being the Washington Generals. And they think that as long as they can get 40% of what they want, or maybe 30%, but as long as they keep their job, and then they'll become a lobbyist and make 3 times what they make as a congressman, then
Right.
they're fat and happy.
Right.
It's a swamp in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
It's very incestuous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things that the systemic, I mean, I'll call it oppression, the systemic oppression,
Yeah.
It is, let me think of the word, my COVID's kicking in.
Yeah.
They unify
Mhm.
over the stereotyping of what I call the archetype, right? The
Yeah.
scapegoating of the white, straight Christian male, typically from the South, but that could be some dude in Idaho too. To them,
Yeah.
he's a Yahoo, the same as
Right.
some guy
Right.
from Tennessee. But
Mhm.
it's that the deplorable,
Mhm.
their guns and their Bibles, and they're
Mhm.
all, in all these
Mhm.
red states, and they're all uneducated, these people who aren't taking the jab. It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons that I personally thought that there was a need for a fellowship, kind of reaching out to the forgotten man that even people within the church, unfortunately, like to malign and do so
Yeah.
carelessly, unapologetically, and they don't ever think to be edifying. They double down. In fact, my follow-up is going to feature some really outlandish things. Some priest said to me, 2 priests. One, I'm going to reach out to, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But 2, I'm going to share their words, because it is shocking
Mhm.
the level of demonization of this
Mhm.
archetype.
Mhm.
And so anyway, let's talk about the Ludwig Orthodox Fellowship. It is a
Mhm.
fellowship I've started with a few people, fellow
Mhm.
Orthodox, and I reached out to George a while back.
I'm in.
Gosh, yeah,
Send
he's in.
me my membership card.
Well, you're on our fellowship friends page.
Okay, good.
But tell me, when I reached out and said, hey, we have this missions-based fellowship where we want to
Mhm.
nurture the roots of Orthodoxy in Dixie's land
Mhm.
because we think it's fertile ground, but we also see a need
Mhm.
because there are people here who we think are
Mhm.
floating, they're whatever, twisting in the wind, floating through
Mhm.
the ether, whatever you want to say. And they have felt abandoned by not only their neighbors,
Mhm.
but by the different lowercase c
Mhm.
churches.
Mhm.
I was one of those people when I was fleeing Protestantism, and Orthodoxy welcomed me in. So
Mhm.
tell me why you were interested in, when I said, hey, you want to be a part of this, and you said you want to be in. What do you think is important about nurturing the roots of Orthodoxy in Dixie's land? And as a Tulsa native, you told me once that you see Oklahoma as a part of the larger South, as do
Mhm.
I. Tell us why that is. So those 2 questions.
Well, Oklahoma was not a state during the war between the states, or the War of the Northern Aggression. However, it was populated by the 5 civilized tribes who were exiled from the South, per se, the Southeast. But they were planters, a lot of them, and they brought their slaves with them, and they set up plantations and farms here in Oklahoma. Most of them fought for the South. Okay. Um, but geographically, I mean, you've got the Mason-Dixon line, and it keeps on going over and over until it gets to Oklahoma, and then you go down to Texas, and stuff like that. And Texas was part of the South, and so politically there was no Oklahoma at the time; it was just Indian territory, and it was divided into 5 nations: Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole. Anyway, and they each had their own regional governments, national governments, actually. So anyway, the and most of the and then when the whites came, okay, the Anglos, I guess you could call us, most of them came from the South as well and just settled in Tulsa or in Oklahoma. A lot did come from Pennsylvania during the oil boom, and settled in Tulsa. So there was a mixture. I'm not saying that everybody's a dyed-in-the-wool Southerner. That's not true. Although the secessionist movement seems to be rising, and as far as our gun culture, you don't even want to go there.
Right.
I mean, our governor's already said that the writ of the Attorney General of the United States is not going to extend here as far as vaccine mandates and as far as guns.
Yep.
So you can't get much more southern than that.
Yep.
Of course, I think that's spreading, though. You said earlier about Idaho. I'd say the same thing about Iowa. I would say the same thing about Oregon and Washington State west of the Cascades.
Right.
I mean, those people are, very independent, gun rights people, rural, exurban. So anyway, if you don't mind me saying, interjecting here, you said
Please.
something about two priests who came to you and really just, disappointed you.
Mm-hmm.
When you said that, something went off in my head, and I think I know the reason why that is. And that is that most of our seminaries are on the East Coast. St. Vladimir's is in New York State. Holy Cross is in Boston, Massachusetts, Brookline, actually. St. Tikhon's is in Pennsylvania, so I'll give them a pass. And the ethnic Orthodox are still congregated heavily on the East Coast. So they've imbibed the Yankee narrative.
Now, do you know these priests? Because
I don't know the priest you're talking about.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
No.
Because they happen. It's interesting. I want you to finish bookmark it, but these priests are actually from the South, which is I find fascinating. They're both.
Oh, really?
I think they're both native Texans. I think.
Really?
So I found that fascinating. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, it's some dude from New York, whatever.
Well, that's disappointing. Did they go to school back east?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
What can I say? But
it shows the power of it, though. It shows the power of the indoctrination. That
yeah. I mean, when you're raised from kindergarten on up with a certain belief system, to give it up in the face of opposing facts,
mm-hmm.
It's difficult to do.
Right.
And sometimes events help, though. I think more and more people are going to become more and more conservative and secessionist in their outlook, is especially as things continue to go downwards, de-escalate, or whatever I'm trying to say. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say about that, is that maybe that's why you were so disappointed. I don't know. I stand corrected. Anyway.
Oh no, I mean, I think you're right. That happens a lot too. But and that's one of the things when Southerners say silly things about the South. It just drives me crazy, because I'm like, they should know better. It's just like when Christians say silly things,
Well, you're right.
You're like, you should know better. Like the bar is higher for those people,
I mean, I still have evangelical contacts. I'm well read in the evangelical movement, and there's no difference between your average evangelical millennial and a social justice warrior at this point.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons that the public orthodoxy basically ran a hit piece, and George, my lovely guest, was mentioned in it as a white supremacist, as was I. So let's talk about that for a little bit. That here we have this this fellowship that, what's today? Is it the 11th?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
no, it's the 12th.
Oh, so a month and 1 day ago, we launched the site. So in less than a month, we had this huge attack piece, and it went out all over the place. And public orthodoxy is part of Fordham University. This guy who wrote it, Aram Sarkeesian, whatever his last name is, he he's a scholar, he's well respected, blah blah blah. So
they're a dime a dozen.
Yeah, give
We're a
us.
dime a dozen, seriously.
But they're
Yeah.
being groomed to be like hate experts, you know?
Yes, I agree. I agree.
You know, the SPLC has already quoted the female version of Aram before, so she is being groomed as the hate expert. So what she says is going to be parroted by the corporate media. Now, of course, smart people will ignore it, but naive people will see it and get really scared, throwing around the word white supremacist and fascist, blah, blah. Tell us tell us your thoughts.
Okay. You're right. Let me back up. The fact that I didn't know this, that this fellowship is only 31 days old or 30 days old or whatever, but the fact that they came out within 3 weeks shows how scared they are.
That's right.
This, yeah,
exactly. That's what I thought.
This is not confidence. Personally, if I were them and we were nobodies, true nobodies, and the South was nobodies, and the South was not rising, and traditionalism was not rising, ignore us.
Right.
I mean, we're not, we're piss ants if that's the case. But it's not the case, because they came out with this hit piece. It was, I tore it apart in, 5 minutes. Father Whiteford did a much greater effort, and he almost wrote a book in which he just tore them apart limb by limb. And I'm curious as to see how far this is going to go.
Right.
We'll see. My advice to them would be to drop it, but they're not going to take my advice, because they're scared and they're running scared. And when people are scared, they make unforced errors. And this is something that I saw in our episcopate after the Charlottesville thing. Within 2 days, they came out condemning it.
Yeah.
But 2 years later, was it two? It was
4.
But or 3 or 4 years later, we had Greek bishops and OCA priests march in Black Lives Matter rallies, without even thinking about it.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, enough of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because over Thanksgiving, I had written an essay before about, why the fellowship was a thing, why the South was a good place for the fellowship. But I kept wanting to write about the missions aspect of it, not just growing the church. That's wonderful. But the individual people, like, it's a salvation issue. And it was Thanksgiving, and, I would type and then put it away and then type and put it away, and I just couldn't do it. I just had writer's block. And then all of a sudden this piece comes out, and I'm like, this piece is completely proving why we need this fellowship in the first place. So these priests who are not very nice people and loving toward their Southern neighbors, they're just proving it. To me, it's like, thank you, Public Orthodoxy, for proving our point. And we've gotten a ton of traffic. We've gotten, a few new friends, a few new people on our local Orthodoxy page, and that's it. And to me, I hope you're right. I hope we are a majority. We, as in non-leftist wackadoodles, right?
Yeah,
but
right. That's a good one.
If we're not, we just need a small, strong remnant of people who just say, we don't care what you think, we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
I agree with you. Even if we're not, remember what Andy Jackson, the patron saint of the South, said, or a patron saint, because again, I have a problem with the nullification thing. But he said one man with courage constitutes a majority.
Yes, I like
it.
And
it was, and Alexander the Great said, it is better for an army of sheep to be led by a lion than an army of lions to be led by a sheep. And I think we're going to win. Maybe not next year, maybe not the year after that, but it's not possible for the whole feminazi, gay, tranny, woke, Leninist, cultural Marxist ideology to go forward and to keep on, to invigorate this nation. It just can't.
Right.
And to the extent that these things have peaked into the South, that's sad. But I think we can, as was it Flannery O'Connor said, I'll take my stand. I mean, it's worth fighting for.
Yeah. And one of the things that, I'm a journalist by trade. I actually have a degree in journalism, and I've always been a curious person. Back when I got my degree, I was one of those left-wing wackadoodles, but I still, being a Gen Xer, wasn't the kind of feminist or atheist or socialist that I think the world and K through 12 and academia are producing today, because I still believed in truth, and I believed in talking with people. Now, I may cry and kick and scream and call people names or something, but then they were able to plant seeds. I didn't plug my ears. So, I find that fascinating that a lot of the people that think of themselves as the most academic, the learned ones, because note, out of our fellowship four founders, two of them have PhDs. They were not mentioned in that article. I find that fascinating.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So only myself and Father John Whiteford. I think he just has a master's, not just a master's, and I have a bachelor's. So that is odd.
That is odd.
Yeah.
That is odd. Yeah.
Why would you think that is? I have my take, which I'm going to write an essay about. Why would you think that is?
Maybe they don't want to pick a fight. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Or maybe because they're scared, like you said, because our two PhDs in our fellowship are extremely smart people.
Well, getting back to that, I mean, obviously, Father John Whiteford has an MDiv, but what he wrote the other day, which you sent me, was just, it was just blew my mind.
Yeah. Yes, it was very good. And I've shared it all around. It is long, though. I should probably, I'll link to that. I'll link to all of our stuff. My retort, yours, theirs. I'll put it all down in the show notes.
And I'm going to link to it too on our blog.
Okay. So. Now I want you to tell me honestly. You had read my retort and said you have grit. Do you think it was a little too hard?
No. And I'll tell you why. Well, first of all, you didn't lapse into profanity or anything like that. I mean, you didn't act immature. But this may be because of my age. I'm 62. I don't have time for sugarcoating things anymore. I just don't.
Yes.
And I appreciate the grit, and it's important that it comes from a woman, because women have that little edge over men. You know what I'm saying? And I'll tell you this. When a woman speaks courageously like this, it gives courage to other men. It gives us permission to go ahead and up the stakes a little bit.
Yep, white knight for us. We need it. Woohoo!
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
Well, and my not a motto. The thing that guides me writing ever since I started my blog. I had done it anonymously, and then I got doxxed, and then whatever, my name's just on there. But even when I was anonymous, I always said, I want to have every word, every syllable I write to be something that when I get doxxed or when I decide to reveal my name, that I'm proud of it. And I am. 5 years of writing, and bold but loving. That's my motto. And I'm a journalist, and that's kind of the way I'm tackling this. So I'm not just a wife and a mother and a fellow Orthodox Christian and a neighbor. I'm a journalist. So I'm trying to get at it in that way where I think some people think I'm trying to be mean, but to me, there is nothing more important than defending the church. It is the last, it's the end of the road for my family, man. If we don't have this,
if we don't have this, we've got nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. And it didn't come across as mean to me. Now, maybe 10 years ago, I would have probably thought, or 20 years ago for sure, because, I was still in the game, at work, tried to be politically correct, trying to, make coalitions and stuff like that. But no, we're listen. I mean, when they started throwing, we've got a nice grocery store just a half a mile from us, and last year they, some windows were broken, and I'm thinking, well, this is too close to home, literally,
Right.
and I'm not going to be nice anymore. There's no reason to. So I mean, that doesn't mean I'm going to go the full Antifa or anything like that. No.
Right.
But I'm going to defend myself, and you're doing it in your way.
And I find it fascinating too how this is a common refrain amongst laity, where, oh, just focus on your own sin.
Oh my gosh.
This and that. Oh, you should be getting down on your knees. I'm like, calling somebody a white supremacist can get them killed. Why is everybody so casual about this?
Yeah.
I'm like, wait till somebody calls you one. It's not that I want to defend against being a white supremacist, because I think that's stupid. It means nothing. And of course, supremacy would entail systemic power, which we've already discussed we have none.
Right.
So,
right.
But everybody's just so casual about, whatever.
Well, I mean, you could get killed. At the very least, you could lose your job.
Yes.
And so these pietists, there's nothing wrong with piety, but these pietists or these quietists, Q-U-I.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah,
I'm stealing it. Quietists.
Quietism is a heresy. I mean, if you see a child being abducted on the street and you just cross your hands and pray, you're going to be called to answer to that before God someday. You could have stopped it. If you could have stopped it, at least pick up the damn phone and call the cops. Do something, I mean, it's not a matter of becoming social justice warriors. Those people are idiots. I'm sorry. They just are. They're trying to make up for their own inadequacies, and they make themselves feel better by saying that guy over there is a racist. Okay, but I'm not talking about being a social justice warrior. I am talking about defending the faith, though, and you are called to do that. I think we all are in our own way,
right?
And the church says when the Congress calls you up to give you a uniform and gives you a rifle and you go to war, you're supposed to do that too.
Right.
You're supposed to defend your country. So anyway, you're supposed to obey the police, the courts, whatever. But yeah, you said it very well. I mean,
it drives me crazy, George.
George, call me George.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no.
I have COVID mouth, but it drives me crazy. I mean, have people been telling you this for, oh, George, just worry about your own sin? It's both. It's a balance. You can do both.
I agree.
Hello, I'm a parent. Am I only supposed to care about myself? And you know what else they always say? Stop acting like such a Protestant. I'm like, what's any more acting like a Protestant? No offense, my Protestant listeners, but from an Orthodox perspective, than only caring about, only your own thing or whatever, So
yeah.
And I probably did just offend all my Protestant listeners, but my point is that they use this as a bludgeon within the orthosphere of these pietists that you're talking about, or like prelest or whatever it is, these pietists, to shut you up. And it's ridiculous. Nobody functions in the world that way. You have to do both.
No. Yeah, you got to. I mean, and Jesus said, turn the other cheek. Okay. Interestingly, 94% of people on earth are right-handed. And so Jesus said, when somebody slaps you with the back of the hand on your cheek, what he's talking about is you're getting slapped on your left cheek, like that.
Yeah.
And he says, so turn your other cheek. And then that's forcing him to slap you with his left hand, like that. And usually that puts a stop to it right there before. Once you turn that cheek, that stops it usually.
Right.
And it's just you'll let the guy get one lick and no more.
Right.
So we as Orthodox Christians, we have a right to stand up for the faith.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, and even coming from an evangelical background, I have written articles since becoming an Orthodox, trying to inspire Protestants to stand up to mania happening within their church, because that actually has an effect on our society, because it's still a Protestant dominant society. It has an effect on our laws and all sorts of things.
Right.
And so, yeah.
I find nothing wrong with Protestants being Protestant. If you were the old hard shell Baptist or Billy Graham or stuff like that, we need more of those guys.
Yeah, if you can find a church, those don't exist anymore.
Yeah, but even here in the buckle of the Bible Belt, which is what they used to call Oklahoma, your average mega church is it's just a rock concert.
Oh yeah,
it's a feel good thing. And there's gay marriage.
Yep.
And
tons of BLM, tons of white guilt foot washing and all this nonsense. It's ridiculous. So that leads me to my next question. So Father John Whiteford said there's an Orthodox America has a cultural Marxist problem. And he was taking it from the public orthodoxy hit piece, playing around with the word. So again, Orthodox America has a cultural Marxist problem. I agree. I'm sure you do, but I want to parse it out a little bit with you. And I think it's not just because there are people who believe in cultural Marxism, just they're the Kool-Aid drinkers, but the ones who don't are just scared to stand against it because they're so scared of being called names. How can good, strong Christians, Orthodox Christians, be scared of being called names? I mean, I get that that there are ramifications for it. We've talked about it, but if we all said we don't care if everybody's called a racist, who cares? Whatever, it means nothing anymore. It would have zero power.
Right. Well, if you say to somebody who calls you a racist or whatever, I don't care. I mean, it's like what happened to the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz. They immediately explode or disintegrate. We're at the point right now, and I'm stepping back and trying to tell people through your wonderful podcast that we really are winning because, well, for instance, like this Jesse Smollett thing. I saw some tweets from some idiots like Joyless Reed, and she still says, no, he's innocent. I mean, this shows to me an insanity, okay? A fear that they're losing the narrative, okay? So your question was,
gosh, I forgot too, George.
Yeah, well,
about Orthodox America, if it has a cultural Marxist problem.
Yeah. Okay. I like the way that Father John started that, and he said to Dr. Sarkisian, well, gosh, you're against slavery. Yeah, so am I,
Stunning and brave.
And welcome to the game. It's only 160 years after the fact, and you know what? And I'm against foot binding too.
Right.
What I want to go further in my own blog, and I'm thinking about it as we speak, and I want to say to Dr. Sarkisian and other cultural Marxists, whether they're at Fordham or Catholics or evangelicals or whatever, secular Jews, you really believe in the social justice warrior stuff? Okay, fine. I'll tell you what, there's a whole bunch of Islamic bakeries in the Detroit area. Why don't you go to one of them and ask to bake a cake for a gay wedding?
Right.
Why don't you do that? Because the thing that Father Whiteford said is, this is cheap grace. They say they're against things that are no longer in existence.
Right.
There's no virtue there because you don't have to worry about consequences. You go to you go to an Islamic baker and say, well, me and Bob here are going to get married. We want you to bake a cake. You'll be lucky if you get out alive, Right. And if you go to the Gaza Strip or, some of these Islamic countries, well, then, they'll take you up to the third floor of a building and then they'll just drop you off. with your hands tied behind your back. You know,
Right.
there's a, supposedly slavery is so evil, and I believe it is. Well, then why don't we send our army to Libya right now to conquer that country, to close down the slave markets there?
Yeah.
No, we don't care. I mean, and it's not white people that are being sold to slavery. There's black people.
Right.
Some and some of the men are being castrated. I mean, I think that's pretty evil. But they'll beat up on Robert E. Lee or Stonewall Jackson, men who are dead over 150 years now. But they won't put their money where their mouth is, and
Right.
that angers me a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, he outright supports critical race theory in his article
Yeah,
and just act like, oh yeah, everybody
yeah,
supports critical race theory. Oh
yeah,
yeah, multiculturalism's so great. See, that's why we're all getting along so great. It's just so
yeah,
hunky dory. And I'm like, critical race theory enslaves people today. They're called my children. So
yeah.
there is
Right,
slavery that he absolutely supports,
right.
and it
Well, yeah.
is
I
alive
mean,
and well against my
you and
children.
I and our children are evil,
Yeah,
according to critical race theory.
right,
What's the difference between that and what the white Aryan resistance believes about black people,
right.
or Hispanics, or third worlders from the Arab world and all that? I mean,
Yeah,
they actually do believe that these people are evil and or less than human. Okay,
right.
okay, that's what the white Aryan resistance believes. Okay, critical race theory is the same thing. It's just the
Right.
inverse. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
And
And they'll defend a black nationalist like
mhm,
Daryl Brooks and
mhm,
try to memory
mhm.
hole that whole thing.
Oh yeah, oh
You
yeah, yeah,
know? But we're the
yeah,
big bad white
yeah,
supremacists.
yeah. Which again, by just burying that story, or as you like to put it, memory holding it,
Mhm.
they're doing it because they have to. They feel like they have to do it.
Of course.
Otherwise, people are going to start asking questions.
Yes, it's true if it's
Mhm.
against the narrative. And
Yeah,
I
against me.
guess you're
Mhm.
against the narrative. I'm
Yeah,
against the narrative. The fellowship's
yeah.
against the narrative. And guess how much we care? 0%, right, George?
0%. Yeah. You see, because yeah, 0%. And that bothers them too.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
I'll never forget a year ago, um, Senator Rand Paul was on the George Stephanopoulos show, and George Stephanopoulos asked him, "Well, you do agree that Joe Biden won the election?" And Rand Paul would not agree, and he kept on pestering him, and then George, and I wrote about this. I mean, he was like agitated, but you gotta agree. You got to agree. I mean, you don't believe us? You know, he sounded like a 14-year-old girl whose boyfriend just broke up with her or something like that. I mean, he was, and I was looking at him, I was thinking, he's acting like a child. You know, instead of saying, "Well, that's interesting, Senator, you don't believe it. Can we discuss this? What proof do you have that you don't believe the election was fair or without fraud?" That's the way you proceed if you're grown men.
Right.
But unfortunately, our society has become so feminized. Hard. I love women, okay, but it's just become so soft
Well, you
that
do not have to apologize for saying
okay,
that
all right,
society has
okay,
become
yeah,
feminized. I minored in women's studies, so I
okay,
am um,
yeah,
very well versed with how evil feminism is because it nearly ruined my life spiritually, physically, and mentally. But
oh
I
yeah,
live to tell about it, which is another reason that I am so, I guess, gritty, as you would
mhm,
say,
mhm,
because I've seen the dark side, and there
mhm,
is, you know,
mhm,
I know what I'm not like a whatever highest IQ, most brilliant person in the world, but I know how leftists think because I used to be one. And
mhm,
they're just very predictable
mhm,
and they need to be held account. That's the only thing that can stop them, or at
mhm,
least have good people wake
mhm,
up and say, okay, we're just not going to play your game anymore.
mhm.
And
Well,
go
yeah,
ahead.
if you don't mind me asking, because you told me you had three sons,
Mhm.
and clearly you broke out of the matrix
Mhm.
because in reality, my take on the feminist movement, at least third wave, is that they don't want young women to have children or to get married.
Yes. Well, I didn't get
Is that
married
true?
till I was 29,
Okay.
and I had to propose to my husband because he was scared to propose to me because I said that, marriage is an oppressive institution. And then we waited 7 years to have kids. So I didn't,
Yeah.
so I was an old lady by the time I started having
Yeah.
babies, and then had one and then twins 16 months later. So I agree 100%. The answer to that question is yes. They want them to think the cubicle is freedom. They want them to hate men, hate themselves. I mean, women have never been more miserable.
I know.
Ever.
That's
They're
true.
all on Zoloft and they can't
Yeah.
understand why their lives suck so bad. And it's like, because you do what the world tells you to do. That's why.
Right. And you listened. The lady who wrote Sex and the City, Candace Bushnell, she came out a couple of years ago and said that she was sorry that she promoted this kind of lifestyle, this barrenness.
Yeah.
And of course, once you get to a certain age, then, childbearing is out of the question.
Right.
So anyway, I didn't want to go there, but I just, that goes along with the cultural thing of Monomakos. And anyway.
Well, I was just going to tell you, as a woman, I would say, don't apologize for saying that our society has become feminized, and that is not a good thing. And that's one of the reasons I love you, is because in your takedown, the little, you wrote like a tiny little essay before you did your video, and you put the battle flag there, and you just said, because we can. I'm like, yes. That is right. And that was one of the greatest takeaways when I first saw that story. They didn't have a battle flag with like a guy with a hood or a battle flag with like a picture of, Kunta Kinte getting whipped or something. They just had this beautiful battle flag. And I was like, that's such a win, just that they featured this battle flag and don't even know that we think that's a total win.
I know that. And I will say this, and I don't want to take up any more of your time, but unless you want it. But when people say, well, it's a lost cause, and Sarkisian said that it's the lost cause, and you're not going to get it back, and and you're not going to make the South Orthodox with this kind of a backstory. And and I thought about it, and I thought, that's not necessarily true. Sure, the South lost, but who else lost? I mean, with the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, they lost. The Jews lost their temple twice, but culturally they've still won. The Greeks didn't have a nation until 1830. For 3,000 years before that, they had no nation. They had civilization, culture, and all that, but they had no nation. But because of these losses that they endured as a people, they came back, and just because the wrong man surrendered at Appomattox, that doesn't mean that the South is lost, or what the South, the agrarian nature behind it, the Christian nature, understanding of humanity. I really like that thing that you did with Michael Sisko and Father Whiteford. The difference between the North and the South, that mentality, that humane mentality that was in the South as opposed to the North, which was industrial, I think is going to come back. And I think that's where Orthodoxy is.
Right. Yeah.
One thing about when you go to an Orthodox country and you go to the South, people don't usually ask you what you do. They just, because you're made in the image of God. It doesn't matter whether you're a brain surgeon or a bum on the street. You are in the image of God, and the South internalized that.
Yes.
And if we can get back to that, Orthodoxy will help along the way, I think.
Yeah, and I think it is the natural fit because it's not so man-centered. They understood that nature is going to do what it does, and it
right.
Because of that, they had a little o Orthodox understanding of
Mhm.
religion.
Mhm.
And, Alexander Stevens said the cause of the South is the cause of us all. And it's not because of, all the political machinations. It's let us alone, let us do our
Mhm.
thing,
Mhm.
love God, love our families,
Mhm.
and,
Mhm.
try to be the best people we can.
Mhm.
And really localism, I think, will, is going to help along with this too. And I think that's what is going to aid America, the blob that
Mhm.
it is, and as well, because it's all just too big. We're all too deracinated. It's all too crazy,
It is.
And I think, and that's one of the beautiful things about Orthodoxy is it's very decentralized too.
Yes.
Yes, it's hierarchical, but it's decentralized, and
Right.
sometimes so decentralized that I want like the hierarchs to be saying things, but
Yeah. I know.
sometimes the
Yeah.
hierarchs who say things,
Yeah.
that they're over here
Yeah.
saying lots of, cultural Marxist stuff or whatever, left-wing stuff, however you want to
Yeah.
say it. But then the ones over here are silent. And sometimes I get really mad about that, but that cuts both ways.
It does. It does.
And it's,
Well, you know, the battle flag,
Mhm.
the genesis of that's the cross of St. Andrew.
Yes. And you had told me, I actually have this written down, that the battle flag was planted by the Holy Spirit. Would you agree with that?
I think so, because
I wrote
that's,
that down in one of our phone conversations. Parse that
yeah,
out for
right.
us.
Yeah, no. There is the concept in Orthodoxy of the spermatic logos,
Mhm.
which is, a sperma being a seed and the logos being, Christ, or reason, rationality that governs the universe. And the spermatic logos does plant seeds all over the world,
Yeah.
and they can sprout into Orthodoxy. They can. And it's done in the weirdest of ways, or for instance, when Vladimir the Great said, he says, I need a religion. Well, the Muslims came to him and said, this is what you have. You can keep all your wives, blah, blah, blah. It's a warlike religion. He said, yeah, but you can't have alcohol. And he said, well, drink is the joy of the roost. And so then the Jews came to him and he liked them. He says, guys, you guys are pretty smart. You got a lot of moxie about you and all that. And he says, well, where's your homeland? They said, well, we don't have a homeland. He goes, well, then you can't be chosen if you don't have a homeland, if you've lost it. And so they went to the Germans, and they were Catholic at the time, and he liked it, but he kind of didn't like some of the things because it's all got to be in Latin. And then he went to the Greeks, and they said, well, do whatever you want, one wife, but we'll do the services in your language, and you can drink all you want, and there you go. It and it grew. It's but 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 you see instances of the so-called spermatic logos like that, and I think the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia is an example of that. I really do.
Yes. Yes. And I think, God willing, the fellowship will one day talk about the roots of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
battle flag.
Mhm.
And did you know that we actually, so if you go to our fellowship page, we have that collage banner that like swipes out and it has all the
Mhm.
different pictures. Did you know that we have a Confederate flag in there for all you people who claim to know history and didn't know it was there, because we've gotten absolutely no pushback. It's
There you
the
go.
it's the
There you
Lee's
go.
Lee's headquarters flag, and the stars represent the Ark of the Covenant. So there you go, history people who think
Yeah.
you're big fat
Yeah.
scholars.
Yeah. Hey,
Now my COVID's talking, George. Sorry, I'm getting a little
that's
loopy.
yeah. That's okay. I do want to end on one note,
Yes,
if you don't
yes.
mind. And we always get pushed back because of the slavery thing.
Mhm.
But yet, in reality, slavery was well on its way to dying out. And if the North was really concerned about slavery, then they could have ended it by buying out the contracts of all the slaves and
Yep,
settling them, west of the Mississippi,
yep.
or buying land,
Mhm.
giving them 40 acres and a mule. But they didn't want to do that because they would rather have the issue rather than the solution.
Yep.
It's the same thing with abortion now. I mean, the Republican Party has used that for a long time just to gin up the votes. Okay. That they don't really care that
Yeah,
much.
I agree.
Some do,
A
but
few.
yeah. And on the other side, the Democrats, they don't really care about the things that Bernie said he wanted: $15 minimum wage, health care for all, Medicare for all, free tuition. Those things are gone by the wayside. They used them to gin up votes, but they had absolutely no desire, no intention of ever implementing those things.
Yes.
So going back to slavery, I think the North, if they were really serious about getting rid of slavery, an amicable solution could have been found. And but they didn't want to do it for whatever reason. I
Yep.
have my ideas, but we'll talk about it some other time.
That's a whole nother podcast, George.
It
Well,
is,
listen, I would
Uh-huh.
love to have you and Gail back on sometime. And
Yes.
I thank you so much. It took a while to get it going.
Yeah,
We had the whole, the hit piece coming and everything went
yeah,
topsy-turvy. And then I got the coof and,
yeah.
life is life.
Life is life. Yeah.
But I just feel so blessed too. I feel like I can call you a friend now, that
Please.
I'm just so blessed that you're part of the fellowship, and I would just be honored if you would come back on sometime. And I'm so happy I've been able to introduce people who don't know you
Well, thank you.
to them.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, well, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.